Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, we will start discussing about the second chapter of your history, New Kings and Kingdoms. First, we will discuss that how new dynasties came into existence. Well, many new dynasties emerged after the 7th century. By the 7th century, there were big landlords and warrior chiefs in different regions of the subcontinent, and the existing kings often acknowledged those landlords and warrior chiefs as their subordinates or samantas. So, after the 7th century, the existing kings started acknowledging the powerful landlords and warrior chiefs as their subordinates or samantas. What those subordinates or samantas expected to do? They were expected to bring gifts for their kings or overlords present at their courts, whatever court were organized by the kings, that subordinates need to present there in order to support the king in decision making or whatever kind of support the king might require in that court. They need to present there and offer it to the king. They also expected to provide the king military support. If ever the king indulged in any kind of war, then whoever king they were serving as their subordinate or samantas expected to provide their king with military assistance, means whatever amount of army they have, they need to hand over those army to the king who granted or who acknowledged them as his subordinate. As Samantas gained power and wealth, they declared themselves to be Mahasamantas, Mahamandaleswar like titles. With the passage of time, with the course of time, the Samantas or the subordinates start gaining power and some wealth. They started declaring themselves or they started entitling themselves with big titles like Mahasamantas, Mahamandaleswar, etc. So initially they were simply landlords or warrior chiefs. Then their position shifted to subordinates of king or samantas of king, and now they gradually started to entitling themselves with big titles like Mahasamantas, Mahamandaleswars, etc. After some time, when their power grew more, they asserted their independence from their overlord. They started to declaring themselves as a king and they no more belonging to any king's subordinate, or they did not remain as a mere samanta to any king. They started to declaring themselves independent and they turned as independent ruler. For example, the Rashtrakuta dynasty of the Deccan. In other cases, men from enterprising families used their military skill to carve out kingdoms. In cases like Rashtrakuta dynasty, they were earlier subordinate to some other king, and gradually, with their rising in power, wealth, they declared themselves independent and turned into ruling dynasty. But in other cases, many men from wealthy family, they used their military skill in order to capture a kingdom and to start their own kingdom. For example, the Kadamba Mayurasharman of the Karnataka region and the Gujara Pratihara dynasty of Rajasthan and Gujarat region. Now let us discuss about the Rashtrakuta dynasty of the Deccan. Well, initially the Rashtrakutas were subordinate to Chalukyas of Karnataka. In the mid 18th century, Dantidurga, a Rashtrakuta leader who was subordinate to the Chalukyas, who was earlier a chief or a warrior chief, he was acknowledged as a subordinate or a Samanta by the Chalukya king, and gradually he overthrew his Chalukya overlord or Chalukya king, and he performed a ritual called Hiranyagarbha, and by that he turned into a king. What is the Hiranyagarbha? Hiranyagarbha's literal meaning is the golden womb. We will see what the meaning of Hiranyagarbha or the golden womb is. Hiranyagarbha is a ritual which was performed with the help of Brahmanas, and by performing this ritual, a person lead to rebirth, punarjanma, as a Kshatriya who were not Kshatriya by birth, they can turn into Kshatriya by performing Hiranyagarbha with the help of a Brahmin. So the Rashtrakuta chief Danti Durga, he performed Hiranyagarbha and rebirth as a Kshatriya king and ruled the Deccan area. Rashtrakuta is an example of how the subordinates or the Samantas raised into power, whereas there were other rulers like the Kadamba dynasty and the Gujara Pratihara dynasty who directly seized the power and did not raise to power from subordinate or from Samanta post. So first we discuss about the Kadamba dynasty. Kadamba Mayurasharman of Karnataka. Mayurasharman was a king of Kadamba dynasty. So the history of Kadamba dynasty is like that they were Brahmanas. They gave off their traditional profession. They were interested in ruling the kingdom rather than performing rituals. So Kadambas were initially Brahmanas, but they gave up their traditional profession, took the arms and successfully established kingdom near the Karnataka area, as you can see here in the map. Just like the Kadamba Mayurasharmans, the Gujara Pratihara of the Rajasthan area, they were also Brahmanas who were not interested in their traditional profession. So, they gave up their traditional profession, took the arms and successfully established kingdom near the Rajasthan area. All these kings, whether they were hereditary kings, means their forefathers were also kings like that, whether they were hereditary king or subordinates raised to power and then turned into king, or some other dynasties like Kadambas and Gujara Pratiharas who directly took army to seize power, every king required revenue. Every king required resource at that time to rule their state, and they obtained those resources from the producer who were often persuaded or compelled to surrender a part of what they produced, like peasants, cattle keepers, artisans, etc. Peasants means farmer who produce different kind of things. Some produces rice, some produces wheat, some produces dal, some produces other kind of pulses. So they need to deposit a part of their production as tax to their king, and by the help of that resource the kings were maintaining or ruling their states. Like peasants, the cattle keepers, they expected to submit a part of their production. Like the cattle keeper might be producing ghee, milk, animal product. So whatever a person's production, he or she expected to submit a part of his or her production to the king. Like that, artisans also required to submit a part of their production. Like if someone is a basket maker, he expected to submit a part of it. If someone is pottery maker, he expected to submit a part of it. And like that, the king were maintaining their kingdom. That's all about this video. Thank you.